today we're going to talk about how to publish responsibly. So we will talk about the importance of headlines, what can go wrong, and why do we need to care about how we write about misinformation in the headline, as well as how we write about in our report. Then we will talk about some of the research behind how people process misinformation and what that can teach us about being more effective communicators. And then we're going to talk about some best practices. So this is me, I'm Esther Chan, First Draft APAC Bureau Editor, and I'm based in Sydney. All right, let's jump right into it. We are going to take a look at how headlines can be weaponized. So NPR, an American media organization, recently released this segment called Few Facts, Millions of Clicks, Fear-mongering vaccine stories go viral online. So this is an analysis about the most popular vaccine-related articles on social media based on data from Newswhip. I don't know if you've used that. It's like a media intelligence company to keep track of what's trending online. So the analysis showed that the stories that connect vaccines to death are the stories that get the most engagement online. For example, this one was one of the most popular vaccine-related stories of the year. It ran in the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, a local newspaper, and the headline says, "A healthy doctor died 2 weeks after getting a COVID vaccine. CDC is investigating why." So we can see how a dangerous headline like this is going to shape the story. We can see that in the first 2 paragraphs. So the first paragraph repeats the fear that laid out in the headline. So 2 weeks after getting a first dose of a Pfizer vaccine, a 56-year-old doctor in South Florida died in January, possibly the nation's first death linked to the vaccine, right? So the writer is saying that the doctor's death is possibly linked to the vaccine. But then when you read the second paragraph, it says that the CDC are investigating what role, if any, the vaccine played in the death of Dr. Gregory Michael. So as you read this article, you find out that actually there is no evidence for a link between the vaccine and his death, right? There may be, but at the moment, there is no evidence. So later on, the newspaper actually issued a correction, and they said, although the condition developed suddenly, a medical examiner's report said there isn't enough evidence to rule out or confirm the vaccine was a contributing factor. So this is a headline that creates a lot of fear and connects vaccines with death, but actually it's not based on any evidence. And to add on top of this problem, what happens from what we've seen is that articles get screenshotted and used out of context. And what's really difficult about this is you can't just click on the image and go to the source and see what the article is about, right? And what you can do is you can only rely on the picture, the headline, and whatever the caption says. So the captions could contain inaccurate information, or sometimes, by copying and pasting just one part of the report in the caption, they may be missing out some important information about the context. And then without that context, just the caption alone and the screenshot, the whole thing would become pretty misleading, right? For example, this is a story coming out of Australia a while ago, where there was a hotel quarantine worker tested positive after getting vaccinated. So from the headline, you would immediately think, oh, the vaccine is not working. But the truth is, he only got the first dose of the 2 doses, right? So, and we all know that if you only get 1 dose, you're not going to be fully protected. So this is what we're talking about when you can't go into the story to read what's going on. And this really underscores the idea that you really only have a few moments to provide factual information in your headline that fits into the screen of a smartphone, without the words being cut out, and also catches people's attention with accurate information while they're scrolling through social media. So you only have a very short sort of time period and a very small space to work with. In this next session, we're going to talk about how we process misinformation and some of the research behind it. So there was a lot of research in the past saying that backfire effects could be a big concern in trying to tackle misinformation. So one of those was the familiarity bias, which is the idea that, by repeating a myth when you're trying to debunk it, you may actually make it more familiar to people and therefore make it easier for people to remember the falsehood. And there's also the worldview backfire effect, which is when you attack someone's worldview or say something that's kind of contradictory to what they believe in, so they double down. And then we also have the overkill backfire effect, that too many corrections may also make people more sure about what they believed in, even though it's misinformation. But if we look at recent research, we actually found that correcting misinformation may be helpful. So there's been a lot of studies that showed over and over again that backfire effects were actually pretty rare, and they didn't necessarily outweigh the benefits of correcting misinformation. One thing that seems to be true across the board is actually the idea that correcting belief is not the same as changing behavior, right? Here are two studies that I recommend for you to check out on this subject about, the relationship between changing behaviors and changing beliefs. So the first one is a collaboration between Africa Check, Full Check, and Chequeado called Health Misinformation in Africa, Latin America, and the UK, Impacts and Possible Solutions. And the other one on the right here is the New Debunking Handbook. So it's a very important piece by John Cook, Stephen Lewandowski, and a lot of other organizations. So the Debunking Handbook was actually published about 10 years ago in 2011, but then last year they released an updated version with all the new research. So it's really worth checking out. So why is it changing someone's belief may not change their behavior? And let's look at this example, right? For example, if your mom got food poisoning from a restaurant, but then you later realize it's not true. She didn't get food poisoning. Maybe she had the stomach flu, or maybe she had a migraine and that's why she threw up. In any case, you know that she's not sick because of the restaurant. But even so, you may find yourself avoiding the restaurant, right? I mean, we can probably think of a lot of examples from our life that, even when some belief of ours was corrected, our behavior didn't really change. We're still hesitant about something. So this is called the continued influence effect. And it's the idea that misinformation is sticky, so it sticks to you. It's very difficult to correct belief. And it's even more difficult to correct the behavior on top of the belief, right? And what can we do about this? First up, focus on the facts. So try to lead with truth and warn your readers before repeating falsehoods. So try not to say something like, a man died after getting vaccinated, which may not be false, but it could be misleading if you didn't provide any context. Right? So the man could have had other health issues, or there might have been another cause of death, even though the timing was, right after his vaccination. So there's usually a lot to explore with a case like this, and it's up to you as the journalist or researcher how to frame your story. And we're trying to inform, but not mislead. Also, don't forget, again, you only have a few moments to catch people's attention, to set your terms of the debate, and also get out the good information when it comes to headlines. Because for most people, news to them is actually really just the headlines, because they will scroll through social media, they will just look at their phone when they're commuting to work. So try to focus on providing facts in that small space. For example, we can take a look at these bullet points here on the website Medical News Today. So they highlighted some of the COVID misinformation and offered debunks in the paragraph, right? So this is the misinformation and this is the debunk. However, the debunks can actually be stronger if they made the factual statements in bold instead of, making the misinformation in bold letters, or they can try to warn the readers that a myth or false information was coming. So you can just, have an intro sort of paragraph saying these are false accusations and not just listing the bullet points like they're actually the factual information, if you know what I mean. Also try to provide alternative explanations, which have the benefit of helping fill what we call a causal gap. So a causal gap is used to describe a situation when someone finds out that something they believed is not true. And what is true is going to stick with them more if they understand why their original belief is not true, right? So you want to have an alternative explanation to fill that hole, that causal gap. Here's some good examples of how that's done. On the left, we have warnings from the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, so the competition watchdog. And it says that scammers are using the spread of COVID-19 to take advantage of people across Australia. So this is a good way to provide alternative explanations because it's not leading with the misinformation or just sort of presenting a bunch of rumors without first telling you about the context, right? So it's really clear here what's going on and then the misinformation or the scams in this case. On the right, here's another good headline from Anchorage Daily News. This is a newspaper in Alaska. So it says, major funder of anti-vaccine movement makes millions selling natural health products. So the thing that's great about this is that it's not just saying this anti-vaccine movement is filled with lies, but it's saying that a possible reason why you may be seeing a lot of anti-vaccine content is because this major funder is making a profit selling natural health products, right? So he has something to gain economically by sowing distrust in the vaccine. So one more tip is let's try to keep it simple, but then not too simple because the detail is important for earning your readers' trusts. So you want to provide context and they have a reason to believe you. And at the same time, try not to overwhelm them with too much information. And if you can, actually try to present a complicated concept visually is very effective because visuals can be very powerful and you can also avoid getting bogged down in words. This is a diagram by Dr. Susie Wiles in New Zealand. So she made this early on in the pandemic. And the idea is to show people how lockdown is an effective way to stop the spread, right? And how if we don't do it, we'll see an exponential growth in COVID cases. So it's a really clear, effective, and powerful way to talk about a concept without overwhelming people with information. Okay, moving on, what not to do. Sometimes you see headlines that are a little bit derogatory, which is not necessarily harmful, but it's not helpful either for building trust. If you try to understand the root concern of a conspiracy theory or the kernel of truth in it, that can be an opportunity for you to build trust with your readers. And you can also reach out to people who may not have believed you in the first place. So what we should try to move away from is, a sort of an elitist and condescending position of authority, and recognizing that, number one, that people have legitimate concerns, and number two, people have trust issues already with elite sources of information. So we don't want to be coming to them from that place. This is another example showing that legitimate concerns do exist. So this news alert from the City of London Police says that police are appealing for information about a man after an older woman was given a fake COVID vaccine at home. So if you were a resident of London, you're probably going to think, oh my God, I need to worry about people giving out fake vaccine. They're going to kill my grandma at home, right? So this kind of scam involving home vaccines has happened not just in London, but also in New York and many other places as well. So you can see why it's a legitimate concern and not just, people spreading misinformation about a fake vaccine. The most effective way to report on misinformation is to try to lead with facts. Then we can either warn about the myth so people prepare to see misinformation, also providing an alternative explanation. Or we can try to explain why something is false and misleading rather than trying to tell people why an alternative is true. So you're staying on what's wrong. And hopefully people understand and they will stay away from that misinformation. And that's a judgment call that you need to make to try to find a way that's the most compelling in explaining something to your readers. And towards the end, you probably would want to try to reinforce the fact again. So bring up the fact again so it sticks, just like misinformation. But this time we want the fact to stick. And if you are interested to learn more about how to report on vaccine misinformation, you can check out this guide on our website. It should provide like a good summary of what we talked about today as well.